So a while ago, I backed out of an offer I accepted with one of Britain's biggest banks. Not only did I do that, I basically blew up my entire life that I've been building in London and came back home. Chances are, if you clicked on this video, you're probably looking at a similarly monumental decision, and now that it has been a few months, it is time to ask the question, do I regret moving back and moving to Asia? More importantly, should you make a similar decision? What is going on, everyone? Welcome back to my channel, and on this channel we talk about how you can live better through economics. Now, if you clicked on this video, you're probably someone considering a move to Asia or a curious Singaporean thinking about what it is like moving back home. I've lived in both Singapore and the West, so if you stick around till the end, you'll get a verdict on whether or not the move back was a regrettable one. I'll be talking a bit about the problems that you might face here in Asia, or rather specifically in Singapore, as well as some of the things that you might enjoy. Finally, we'll come to a conclusion whether or not I regretted that move, leaving what many see as one of the greatest cities in the world. So let's jump right into it by diving into the problems. Yes, Singapore does have its problems, despite it seeming pretty idyllic on the surface, with clean streets, low crime or practically zero crime, and high standards of living. Now, let's start with the first problem, which is going to be the lack of 24-hour public transport. Yes, that means nights out are a hell of a lot more expensive, especially anything past 11 p.m, which frankly speaking is only when the house parties start taking off in London. Maybe this might not be true for every city in the West, but at least in the case of cities like London and New York, for instance, public transport tends to be available pretty much round the clock. Even if your metro or your tube is down, you will be able to take the bus back home, even if it takes a bit longer. There is no need to go and call an Uber, so your spending is going to be kept relatively low. Meanwhile, what I have realized here is that return rides on taxis can cost around $60 to $70 alone just for a night out, and that is not even including things like drinks, things like food, as well as things like the actual cost of the event itself. In the case of London, I spent at most the equivalent of 10 Singapore dollars for a return tube ride, and probably $20 to $30 max. That being said though, public transport over here in Singapore is much more dependable, so I do not need to leave my house 30 minutes early to get where I want to go on time. So that was the first problem on the list, which once again isn't so much of a problem if you are a high earner anyway. The second problem on the list is going to be the standard timeline that many others are following. Now, this might apply to a lot of Asian countries where people tend to follow a common timeline. You could go to various levels of school, you could go off to university, and then the focus turns towards things like starting a family, and sticking to the standard timeline is often a product of staying within the same circles from childhood. Once you make an exit like going overseas, however, you're basically doing a hard fork to your overall lifestyle and can struggle to return to the original timeline, especially if you are in your late 20s to 30s. This could prove particularly challenging if you have been away for a while or are brand new to the particular city. Now, this is by no means a bad thing. In Singapore, or in Asian society in general, we are far less atomized than what you might see in the West these days. On the bright side though, I do think this is more easily solved than not. When I was in London, Singaporeans who I have been close to noted that people tend to be more closed off in Singapore than in Europe. However, while I concurred with their observations, since coming back, what I have noticed is, and maybe this is just perception, in the past 4 years since I've been away, people have in fact become much more open both to meeting new people as well as in terms of the content of the conversations themselves. On top of this, every city is really multiple cities layered on top of each other, so there's really a lot to explore if one were willing to step out of their bubble, for better or for worse. So now that we have covered some of the problems, let's talk about whether or not I regret my choice at all, whether I've burned that bridge with a career in one of the biggest finance cities in the world, and the answer to that is absolutely not. Economically, this was the right choice. With relatively low maintenance friendships in London, this also meant that it was often cheaper to just fly back if I felt like it, so I didn't really blow everything up over there. Longer term, it was also a good move to finally start building equity in a place where you would want to. An analogy to what I was doing in the UK was trying to renovate a rental home only to know that you have to knock it all down sooner or later. Whereas by committing to stay long term in a particular place, that would be like doing home improvements on a property you actually own. The latter is more the case right now, and what's more could I ask for when I'm still working in an international environment in a relatively decentralized team. Reasons for why people leave this region, such as the hierarchical nature of the society, don't seem to apply when you are working in such an international environment, so that is definitely something that played in its favor. Finally, I have been easily able to recreate my lifestyle in London. It really took just 3 months to rebuild, albeit at, as I mentioned earlier, a slightly higher cost. But this is far less than the fixed cost of renting out there. What do you think? Have you been through a similar experience, and have you regretted your decision? Do leave your thoughts in the comments down below, and if you found this video informative or of value, do consider leaving a like and subscribing to this channel. Now, if you haven't checked out my previous video about this move, then you're going to want to check out this video over here. With all that being said, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.